Testosterone with Nick Caputo, along with the 5 most interesting questions y'all have on testosterone. We are also going to be discussing his personal story.
During college, I broke my neck.
His core 4.
Core 4, nutrition, sleep, sunlight exposure training.
Attraction.
Whether that's your finances. You have to win competitions to win sex. Girls wait at the finish line.
And of course, the testicles.
So you want to make sure that your testicles are not being overheated. And again, they don't want to be too cold either. Inverted U curve, money spot.
So let's do this. Welcome to the Subject Matter Experts Show. All right, I am here with Nick Caputo. I am super excited to be speaking with him. I've been actually following him online for many years. I don't even know, 5, 6 years. And he's got incredible knowledge, and I like how he's dabbled in the lesser known facts of the human experience and tested out some of the fringe health concepts that I have gotten into as well. And one of the most amazing things is that he was really skinny, like a skinny little dude, like a skinny little boy kind of energy a year, 2 or 3 ago. And then all of a sudden he put on, I don't know the exact numbers, like 25 pounds in under a year. He looks super healthy. He looks super manly and masculine. And so we are here to talk about hormone optimization of testosterone. And Nick is the founder of Top T Academy, where he teaches people, I'm assuming men, how to do just that. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you, Ra. Glad to be on here. Thanks for having me on.
Amazing.
I'm excited for this too. I've been following you for just about as long, and been intrigued by your content for a long time as well. Been a long time looking forward to this link up.
Cool. Yeah, this is the first time we've actually spoken digitally face to face. So what are you spending your time on nowadays?
My time is mainly spent on just my overall health still, and my business. I would say those 2 things are my 2 main priorities at this point. So I, have my routine with what I do, the things that I eat, the practices that I'm currently practicing, and the stuff that I'm doing for my business.
Mm-hmm. Was there a turning point in your life where maybe that wasn't the priority, and then you just decided like, this is the direction that I'm going to go in?
Yeah, there was a turning point. I would say it was during college. I broke my neck. I fractured my C6 in a snowboarding accident in Colorado, and I really was determined to take control of my health so I could heal fast and get back to doing, what I love to do again. They told me it was a 2-year recovery period, which kind of shocked me. And I was like, wow, I can't accept that. I have to figure out how to make that go faster, because 2 years is a long time. In my early 20s, I don't want to miss 2 years of being able to be an athlete. So I really dove into nutritional topics and just overall health related stuff. And I was able to heal my neck in 6 months instead of 2 years and get back after it a lot faster. And then that kind of just one thing led to another. And I just kept going deeper and deeper and deeper and trying different things. So that was, I would say, the main turning point.
Right. And then there was a point where you started teaching others. Walk me through how you got to that as a expression of yourself.
For sure. I mean, I always enjoyed teaching. So for me, it didn't come too much later after I started learning. I was always kind of like a teach as I learn type teacher learner. So after about, I don't know, maybe 6 months to a year after I really started doing research, applying things, and, my neck was healed, and I really decided that health was more of my passion than what I was currently studying in school, which was finance. So I kind of decided to make the switch. I started my Instagram and just started offering information for free and started to build some momentum, and then eventually kind of got the idea, okay, this might actually be plausible to start a business out of this Instagram page. And then I eventually started doing that with small ebooks and little courses and things like that. And then it turned into eventually what it is today.
I tried finding it before the show, but I remember a year or 2 ago, I was reading something. I think it was a post. Maybe it was under a year ago. It was a post where you cut something out of one of your previous ebooks. And I was super impressed with the data and the knowledge that you put into it. And I was like, geez, how old is this guy? Cause he's speaking like somebody with an advanced level of knowledge on these topics. So are you still doing the ebook thing? How's that going with the courses that you're doing now? What's your main sort of channeling of teaching currently?
Yeah, so I do ebooks still, but less than I used to because now the ebooks are mainly a part of the courses. So additionally, I've added the video modules on top of the ebook so that people can kind of see me and hear me explain what's in the ebooks a little better, in addition to having the physical ebook or the digital ebook.
Talk to me about Top T Academy.
So the Top T Academy is a collection of, I guess, educational resources for men to learn about how their hormones work and how to optimize them. So we have the Testosterone Fundamentals course, which I just launched, which is basically just about how the hormones work and what testosterone is, what it does, how it works, other hormones that influence it, like prolactin, dopamine, estrogen, aromatase, enzymes, things like that, DHT. So that's like the beginner one that I recommend everyone take first. And then we have 6 other courses that are basically my foundational pillars for how to optimize your testosterone or to achieve what I call top T or top testosterone levels. So each one of those courses focuses on one of the major pillars. So that would be nutrition, sleep, training, sunlight exposure, sex, and avoiding endocrine disruptors.
That's amazing. I'm in the business of marketing and sales, and I really like the branding that you have around that whole thing. What's your exact Instagram? I don't want to mess it up, just to give everybody somewhere to go to check that out.
It's Top T Nick.
Okay. If I were to just ask you, because the first thing you mentioned is what is testosterone and how does it work in the body? So if I were to ask you that question, what is testosterone and how does it work in the body, what would you say?
So at a very surface level, it's a hormone, so it's a chemical messenger. It's a little deeper, a steroid hormone, which means that it has the ability to directly impact gene expression because it has the ability to get inside the nucleus of a cell. So steroid hormones are a little bit different than some other hormones in that regard. And then it's also an androgen hormone, so it binds to the androgen receptors and influences sex-related stuff, among other things. So that's how I would describe it, or I would define it. So additionally, I would say that, I could describe how it's produced, but it's not. I guess it's not really relevant to the question. I would say
let's go into that. How is it produced? So
there's 2 main pathways or that signal for testosterone production. So the first one, the main one, is the HPG axis pathway or the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So it starts in your hypothalamus, which releases GnRH or gonadotropin releasing hormone, which then there's a blood vessel that goes directly from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary. So the GnRH goes through that little blood vessel, I forget what it's called, and signals for the release of 2 hormones from the pituitary, LH, luteinizing hormone, and FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. Both of those hormones get released by the anterior pituitary. They go into circulation and eventually get down into your testicles, where they signal different cells in the testicles. So FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, stimulates the Sertoli cells to start producing sperm, and LH, or luteinizing hormone, stimulates the Leydig cells to start producing testosterone. And the Leydig cells will convert after the response or the signal from LH. They will turn cholesterol into a series of other hormones: pregnenolone, DHEA, and progesterone, and then androstenedione, and then testosterone.
Do you have any opinions or any data on what happens before the hypothalamus? What is the actual signal that starts this chain reaction that you just described?
That's a great question. It's a loop. So once you have testosterone produced, you have the enzyme aromatase that converts your hard-earned testosterone into estradiol, or the precursor to it, androstenedione, into estrone, so also estrogens. So the hypothalamus is covered in estrogen receptors, so it gauges how much GnRH to produce based on how much estrogen you have.
So it's monitoring the body for estrogen.
Yeah, it's called a feedback loop system. So based on how much estrogen you have, which is I guess the end of the process, it's like the end is the beginning.
I hit a brick wall when I was younger, so I have a major head injury when I was in 5th grade. And I think when I was like 23, I got tested for testosterone, and the doctor came over to me, and the first thing he said was, "Have you had a head injury before?" And I said, "Yeah, I did." And I explained to the event, and he said, "Because you have the testosterone of a 70-year-old man, and this feedback mechanism," he was explaining to me what you just said, "isn't working."
Interesting.
So then I went on the journey of learning how to increase my testosterone. I have a bunch of little tricks, but all of this stuff you just said is at a ascended level of how much I've paid attention to it. So once the testosterone goes into the body, I think that most people are assuming higher sex drive, increased lean muscle tissue, which may or may not be true. But what does the testosterone do once it's in the body?
So it does a lot of things. So before we continue, I want to mention one other thing with the production pathway. So in addition to LH signaling for testosterone production, there's actually a quicker way that your body does it, and that is in response to catecholamines, so adrenaline and noradrenaline. So in the moment, like let's say somebody punches you in the face, or you encounter like a bear and you're like running or fighting or something, that increase in catecholamines actually directly signals to the Leydig cells to start converting cholesterol into testosterone immediately, whereas the LH pathway takes a little longer and usually takes place more in your sleep. So there's two main production pathways. The HPG axis one with the LH is the one that usually happens for the majority of your production, but that catecholamine pathway is what happens like real quick when you need testosterone like right now. So there's two ways of increasing your testosterone, really.
Those are the two main ways. So we'll come back to that one in a little bit. But let's just say for somebody who's never really you're explaining this very scientifically. Could you maybe just take us another level deeper than most people would think about, like what does testosterone do in the body? Could you just give an overview of that?
Yeah, for sure. So it does a lot of things, I guess on a surface level. Number one, it helps you with energy, helps with motivation, and has a pretty interesting relationship with dopamine. It also gives you a desire to compete and makes you ambitious. It makes males want to seek status, social status. At the end of the day, it's a sex hormone. So behaviorally, it makes you do a lot of things that make you more likely to pass on your genes, right? So it motivates you to seek status, which can, to some degree, lead to aggression, because in the animal kingdom, aggression is usually a way that animals, achieve social status. So it's an indirect link to aggression. Sex drive, of course, and libido, motivation, ambition, energy, all those things behaviorally. Testosterone does. It also helps with insulin sensitivity, so it makes you more insulin sensitive, meaning that you have a better ability to process carbs and not store them as fat. It all, prevents type 2 diabetes in that regard. Also, it helps increase focus and working memory, and also helps to reduce anxiety and depression. I'm thinking
so
off
pretty
the top.
important,
And also
pretty important stuff.
Yeah, and calcium regulation. So it also indirectly helps with reducing risk of cardiovascular disease. And honestly, endogenous testosterone levels, so higher natural testosterone, steroids not included in this, endogenous testosterone levels, meaning natural testosterone levels with no steroids or supplementation or anything like that, is actually associated with lower risk of cardiovascular disease and overall mortality in men. Meaning higher testosterone means you're more likely to both live longer and less likely to get cardiovascular disease or heart disease.
So those are super, super important. All of that stuff is basically, it just means life to me when you're saying all of those things.
Yeah, it's fundamental for male health, both physically and mentally.
What about females?
So it honestly is really important for females as well for overall health, but females have significantly less of it. I think it's an interesting concept to dive into that estrogen is kind of considered the female hormone and testosterone is known as the male hormone, even though both men and women both have both testosterone and estrogen, and women actually have more testosterone than they do estrogen.
Yeah, it's important for women.
Yeah. It's also the main libido driving hormone for women as well. So higher testosterone would lead to higher sex drive for women, the same as men. And they oscillate in their monthly cycles. So when they're ovulating, they have higher testosterone levels because they're more likely to seek out sexual partners because it's their time to get pregnant.
Right.
Which I think is super
interesting. All single males should know about the cycles and even the cycles of the moon, because many women are synced to the cycles of the moon. And then you can pretty much do the math on the hormonal likelihood of every single female out there based on that.
Yep, for sure.
So what are the problems or issues if somebody has low testosterone? So first of all, is there a problem with low testosterone? Many of you know that I own gyms for about a decade, and so I've worked with people on their health and wellness for many years at a time, and by far the biggest impact that I've seen anybody make on their health journeys is from the ULT lifestyle. This program allows your diet to be functional in that it nourishes your cells, it supports the detoxification of the garbage in your body, gets it out, and it also offers the components for your body to rebuild itself. I've seen my clients make more change in 6 to 7 months than they did in 6 to 7 years working out in my high intensity gyms. I've got $120 off your first month. Check out the ULT lifestyle in the description of this show after you're done listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I'm seeing everybody talk about it on social media.
There's lots. I mean, for starters, you just don't feel as good when you have low testosterone. A lot of guys, when they get their testosterone up finally, it's like a night and day difference. They're like, I didn't know how good I didn't feel yet. But we could get into it a little bit more specifically, because you could say that with a lot of things as far as health. So we can get into more detail. In general, I would say basically the opposite of all of the good things I said it does, it doesn't do if you don't have enough of it. So some common symptoms of low testosterone would be low energy, low motivation, no desire to compete or not really having any ambition, low sex drive or erectile dysfunction or any kind of like sexual dysfunction, really, even like anorgasmia from hyperlactin, which will be due to low testosterone, would be like the difficulty orgasming during sex, or when you do, it's like dulled, it's not as intense. Difficulty building muscle mass, higher levels of myostatin, which suppress muscle protein synthesis and make it a lot more difficult to put on muscle, insulin resistance, difficulty focusing, weak memory, anxiety, depression, perhaps cardiovascular disease or high calcium in your arteries.
How can somebody sort of just like look in the mirror or take a assessment of themselves and determine if they have low or even high testosterone? Like, what are some of the biomarkers or indicators that somebody can know without having to go get their blood tested?
For sure. The number one that I usually recommend for everyone to do if they want to test out and gauge their testosterone realistically without having to spend a lot of money on blood work would be to test their grip strength. So you can go on Amazon and get a dynamometer for $25-$30 and squeeze it as hard as you can and test your grip strength. And based on how much weight you can pull with your grip, you can pretty much pinpoint it to where your testosterone levels are.
Really?
Which I think is super interesting. Yeah. And I mean, honestly though, grip strength is more of an indicator of overall androgen status, which is realistically more practical and more accurate than actually getting blood work and just getting your testosterone checked. Because when you get blood work done, right, you just get a snapshot in time of what was in your blood at that very time.
Mm-hmm.
But your, like as they took the blood, what was in it. So your levels oscillate daily. You have a daily cycle where if you even just go at different times a day and you got a blood work at 11 versus 10 versus 3 p.m., you're going to have completely different testosterone levels. So I think grip strength is really practical because you can check your grip strength multiple times per day and see the difference in how your grip strength actually goes up, and you can determine a range to get an overall estimate of the correlation with your blood work. I would say the best way to do it, though, is to test your grip strength and get blood work a couple times, so then you can really get what's accurate for you based on your size. But you can pinpoint it, at least to some degree, as a good estimate based on just like overall like references.
How drastic is the difference? Is there a percentage, or is it just like somebody with low T and that same person with optimal levels?
So, I mean, somebody with like optimal levels, like 800 to 1200 total T, would be at somewhere like 175 pounds plus of grip strength. And someone with like 300 would be like, below 120, like maybe 100, maybe 95 pounds grip strength. So pretty significant. Yeah.
You know what's crazy is I have a dog, and there was a time where, let's just say I was doing some things regarding diet that would lower my testosterone. And I noticed my dog was like starting to disrespect me. And I intuitively calibrated it that he could feel the weakness of my hands when I just like pet him. Like for some reason, like that's what was like, I could see that he was sensing in me was like my hands were getting weaker, and he started disrespecting me. And then, so now that it's not like an issue and I'm eating more in line with higher testosterone, like I always feel that strength going from me to him. But it's crazy that you said that, because I've never heard of this grip strength thing.
Yeah, there's a pretty decent amount of like data and studies on that to confirm it, where it's like I'm comfortable enough to even mention that as an actual way to measure your testosterone. It's pretty cool and practical for most people and low budget. Other ways, I mean, that's obviously not the only way. There's more practical ways. Looking in the mirror, you can tell if you're not growing a lot of body hair, genetics aside. So let's say like, all the men in your family have like decent body hair and you don't, or if the men in your family have thick beards and you don't, something that can be indicative of low testosterone. I mean, muscle mass is a great indicator. If you're jacked, you most likely have higher testosterone than somebody who's not. If you get tired after you eat complex carbs, that would be a way to gauge your insulin sensitivity, like a basic, like bro science way to measure it. If you eat bread and you're exhausted after, or you feel like lethargic, brain fog, tired, you're most likely not super sensitive to insulin. So that's one way to gauge it. Also, I mean, if you eat a normal amount of carbs like a normal person and you're putting on body fat more than you think you should be based on your overall calories, then that can also be another indicator. But that's also insulin sensitivity. But testosterone is a huge factor for insulin sensitivity, so it's worth considering.
So
Easier to have abs when you have higher testosterone as opposed to like, bulking without having the abs. High testosterone helps you stay lean even if you're putting on weight.
right. I've seen those guys that are a little bit soft, almost like they have, like, it just looks like they're filled with estrogen.
Yeah.
So you brought up something earlier, and then you just brought up again. And this is something that most people don't consider. So it's kind of like a lesser known impact of testosterone. You mentioned competing and adrenaline and norepinephrine, I think that you mentioned as well. And then you just mentioned the insulin sensitivity, which I know you're able to process more sugar after like a very intense workout, which is simulating some sort of fight for status as well. So like I've seen you talk about this, but could we get into like what you mean about like the mental dynamics of fighting for status, like evolutionarily speaking, and how that plays into basically a necessity for men to go through in order to optimize their testosterone?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first, as far as status goes, men with higher social status in general, pretty much across the board, no matter what they're doing in their life, tend to have higher free testosterone levels. So free testosterone is the amount of testosterone in your blood that's not bound to proteins. So you have sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG, and albumin that bind to your testosterone. So it prevents it from binding to the receptor, and only a very small percentage of your testosterone is actually free to bind to the androgen receptor. So think of the androgen receptor as the outlet, think of the testosterone as the plug, and think of like the SHBG or the albumin as like that plastic cover that comes on the plug when you first buy something. So most of the testosterone going around in your blood has the cover on it, and then only a small percentage of it has, is ready to plug into the outlet. So men with higher social status, and that could be something like being a manager at your job, being the captain of your high school hockey team, being the tallest one in your friend group, like, things like that, where you just have some sort of dominance of the men around you, or some kind of like leadership position, some kind of like elevated social status from anything. You tend to have higher testosterone levels than those around you. Yeah. So that's one thing. I think there's a decent amount of evolutionary reasons for that, but at the end of the day, it comes back to reproduction and carrying on your genes. So testosterone does increase in survival situations. So let's say your, adrenaline, noradrenaline go up when you have to fight, something like that. It'll go up to equip you, I guess, to survive threats so you can continue to carry on your genes. But then also when you win. So let's say you win a competition. Let's say like somebody comes, you come up to me and you try to fight me. We fight to the death. I kill you. I win. Right now I get all your stuff. Back in the day, now I have all your stuff, all your resources, all your women, whatever it is that you had, I have all of it now. Your food, everything. So now my body additionally gives me more testosterone to equip me to protect those resources. So realistically, the men who have the highest free testosterone levels across the board as far as status goes are the men that are constantly defending their status. So let's say like the best athlete in a sport who's constantly, every single game he's playing, has to defend that status of being that guy and is constantly defending that. There's always guys coming to take that spot from him, and he continues to maintain his position. That is like pretty much the main biggest driver. But in general, any competition where status and resources are on the line will increase testosterone a lot more than competition where there's no status or resources on the line at all. So like if nobody's watching, if there's no money on the table, there's no title to be fought for, there's no championship, there's no playoffs, you know, like for example, or, you know, if you're really better than the guy that you're competing against, let's say, you know, you're playing against your little brother who's 8 years younger than you in the driveway, a game of basketball, and you absolutely destroy him. You're not going to get much of a testosterone boost because you knew you were going to destroy him because you're older than him and better than him, and nobody was watching and nobody cares. So you're not really going to get a big boost from that. There's nothing really for you to gain from it. Whereas like, let's say your brother who is 8 years younger than you beats you, he just overcame a huge challenge in the house. So now like he's the man for a little bit. He's walking on air because his testosterone is going up. So that's just an example.
That's amazing. I used to own CrossFit gyms, and in the gym, we used to say men will die for points. It's just like inherently in the DNA to compete.
Yep.
But the way that you put it,
the biggest bro science way to put it, if you don't have high testosterone, like we were talking, how can you tell if you have low testosterone? If you have no desire to compete and you don't care about winning, that's like you most likely have low testosterone. Like I would say like 90% chance your T is low.
Right. And then the way to more is to put yourself in situations where there is stuff on the line and you are competing.
Exactly. I consider it a two-way street too. So having higher testosterone makes you want to compete for resources and win, makes you want to have that ambition to climb the ladder to become that guy. And then also once you have, once you actually compete more and you are defending status or you achieve that status, that also makes your testosterone go high. So it works both ways. It's a positive feedback loop.
That's crazy. So that's one way, but without giving away all of your secrets, I'm sure you have days and days and days that you could talk on this, but is there somebody listening, what are some practical ways that they could naturally optimize testosterone levels besides what you were just talking about with the competition? Is there anything else naturally?
Definitely. I'll give you the main ones, like I guess my overall pillars. Each of these things, well, most of these things that I'm about to say, I have individual courses on each one of them. So I'm not like, I can give you guys, there's literally 0% chance that I can explain all of this in a podcast, but I'll go over the titles, like the main topics for you guys. So the first one, this is based on the data. It's almost not even debatable. The number one cause for declining testosterone levels in men today throughout the last few generations is nutrition. So micronutrient deficiencies and inadequate macronutrient splits are the number one cause of low testosterone. So the number one thing you can do to get your testosterone up naturally is to get your nutrition on point. And stop listening to nutrition advice from people that are on steroids on the internet, because their nutritional needs are different than yours because they're injecting hormones that you're trying to make naturally. So your micronutrient status is a lot more important than theirs for testosterone specifically, for muscle building and stuff like that. So you want to make sure that you're maxing out your micronutrients and getting your full, like hitting your targets on everything. And there's like 30 plus different micronutrients that you need to focus on.
Amazing. Just a hint of a macronutrient, like what's the macronutrient balance? Is it more of one thing, less of another?
So when it comes to everything as far as nutrition, and honestly most things in general when it comes to health, we see this inverted U-curve, right? So it's like problems happen on one side, and then there's a small area where it goes to the U, and then boom, it's shit again if we have too much. So when it comes to protein, right, we don't want too little protein, we don't want too much protein. We don't want to be too lean, but we don't want to be too fat. We don't want too much carbs, we don't want too little. So it really depends on the person based on your body composition, based on your goals, based on your insulin sensitivity at the time. Usually I recommend somewhere between 20 to 30% of your overall caloric intake to be from protein, and then the remainder being split up between fats and carbs. More fat, I would say like anything more than 25% fat is adequate. I would say 30 is like the sweet spot, at least for me. So mine is I hope this adds up to 100. I think it's 25, 30, 45. So that would be 25% protein, 30% fat, 45% carbs. That's what I aim to make my splits. But somewhere around there in that ballpark is cool. Some guys are on this lower carb wave, which I'm not a huge fan of, which we could talk about. I'm a huge advocate for carbs. So I do more on the carb side, but guys that want to do a lot more fat and less carbs, that's cool too. As long as I would say at least 25% of your total caloric intake is fat.
Mm-hmm. So macronutrient and micronutrient.
Yep. And then micronutrients, I mean, I could go over some bit like the main ones I would say like zinc, magnesium, boron, vitamin A, vitamin D. Well, vitamin D is another hormone, but still, you could get it from food. All the B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin E, pretty much all the vitamins, vitamin K2.
Do you find that
selenium, iodine, yeah, all of them, thyroid hormone.
Do you find that the types of carbohydrate that people are eating, like whether it comes from like rice or fruit, does that make an impact in testosterone?
Yes, and honestly, it's a great question. Brings up a very interesting point. I teach something called, I call it a hunger budget, right? So every day you only have enough appetite to eat X amount of food, right? So if you're going to eat strictly for macronutrients, like something that has pretty much no micronutrient value, and you're getting your macros in, you're kind of like wasting your hunger. You know, you're spending your hunger on something that's not really giving you a great return. So when you are consuming carbs, I definitely recommend things like fruits, like potatoes. So like high micronutrient, antioxidant, dense carb sources. Same with fats and proteins. No matter what you're eating, I definitely recommend high micronutrient profile foods in overall.
There's quite a bit of a war when it comes to vegetables. Where do you stand on that, like vegetables being poison for us or not?
So I think that's a very, very nuanced topic. I am not an anti-vegetable guy. I also am not a hyper-vegetable guy. I'm not a huge fan of lots of different vegetables, but I enjoy onions. I eat lots of potatoes. I like my cilantro and parsley and basil and things like that. If you want to consider those vegetables, or I guess they're kind of herbs. But, in general, I'm not entirely against vegetables. But I think it's important to understand the nuance of specific vegetables and where kind of the defense mechanisms are in the plants, because it's not an incorrect argument that a lot of these carnivore anti-sugar guys make against plants. There are defense chemicals in plants, but I think they over-dramatize it, and I think a lot of it isn't nearly as bad as they make it out to be. However, I mean, things like peeling your potato can make a difference. If potatoes hurt your stomach, there are some of the defense chemicals in the skin of the potato. Even though a lot of the nutrients are in there, also a lot of the poisons are in there. So for some people, peeling the potato would be better. I also wouldn't eat a raw potato. I would cook it, and what you cook it in makes a difference. Like I personally prefer tallow, or I have no problem with something like butter or ghee, but I wouldn't be cooking your potatoes in canola oil, for example, or like sunflower oil. Something like that, grapeseed oil. I wouldn't use any of those. I would use animal fats, mostly saturated fat type stuff, to cook your potatoes and honestly all your vegetables. Onions, pretty much same deal. I wouldn't eat a red onion. I guess I would eat a piece of a red onion raw, but I wouldn't bite into an onion. But you know what I mean? Like in small amounts. But even then, same cooking it, I would use the animal fats to cook the onion. I really don't eat that many vegetables personally, just out of preference and also kind of out of laziness. When I cook for myself, I kind of just focus on, the things that are the main, stuff I got to get in me, like the meat or the potatoes are that's pretty much my main meal that I eat pretty much every day is just steak of potatoes, or salmon and potatoes, or oysters and potatoes. I eat potatoes with pretty much every meal, fried in tallow.
And this is what you recommend for everybody in every age group as well, right?
I mean, it depends on the person and preference. You know what I mean? Some people like rice better. Some people like quinoa better. I think quinoa is great. I do eat it on occasion. I think I just have my routine with the potatoes, but quinoa is a great micronutrient dense food for a carb source. And there's also a little bit of protein in there too. So it's not a bad option. I think really what it comes down to is eat real food. If you're going to eat carb sources, eat real food, care about where it comes from, care about the micronutrient profile. I do think potatoes are the king vegetable, but that's my opinion. With the potassium content and stuff like that. I also eat a lot of salt these days, so trying to balance
I
that out
love
with enough
potatoes.
potassium. Yeah, I got nothing
They're
bad
like
to
my
say about them.
favorite.
Heard.
All types.
Yep, sweet potatoes, the purple potatoes, the regular potatoes, all the
Yeah.
above. Yes, please.
So let's switch gears because we're talking about increasing testosterone. I know that some people get into either testosterone supplementation from exogenous sources where they're injecting it and even using certain herbs where they're just kind of like going overboard on just trying to get the T up. Are there any risks or side effects from having even just natural testosterone, but what are the side effects of testosterone supplementation?
So, okay, this is a decently nuanced question as well. So, I'll cover supplements first. So, like the herbal supplements or the like over the counter kind of marketed supplements that aren't like actual testosterone. So, my opinion on these is not that they're necessarily bad, but that they're snooze buttons. Right? So, your low testosterone is the alarm. The herb Tongkat Ali Fedosia agrestis is a snooze button. So, basically they either, directly signal for lower SHBG for Tongkat Ali or signal for higher LH with Fedosia agrestis. But your brain is very smart and your body's very intelligent. It has certain levels of certain hormones for a reason. So if you have lower LH, you have lower testosterone, it's for a reason. Your body, it's expensive to have high testosterone energetically for your body, right? Muscle mass is expensive. When you have higher muscle mass, you have to eat more calories every day just to continue to exist and sustain your body composition. So your body doesn't really want you to get big. This is why myostatin exists. There's literally a mechanism designed to stop you from getting too big because it's energetically expensive to get big. So what happens with these kind of snooze button supplements is they lower your testosterone. They increase your testosterone, but they don't fix the problem that's causing your low testosterone. So let's say, for example, you have a serious magnesium deficiency, which is why you have low LH or low testosterone, right? And then you take Tongkat Ali and Fedosia agrestis, and they basically signal for your pituitary to release more LH or for your balls to start producing more testosterone or for SHBG to go down. So now you experience an alleviation of the symptoms, but the cause is not actually there. And then that magnesium deficiency might also lead to vitamin D deficiency, might also lead to, magnesium does hundreds of things in your body. So it could be different downstream effects of that cause that does something else. So if it's fixing the testosterone problem, it's not fixing the cause of the testosterone problem, which can cause other problems down the line, which could be long-term or short-term. Depends. So that's my main philosophy on why I don't recommend these things. And then at the same time, I would call these the icing on the cake, right? Or the sprinkles on the icing on the cake, right? The cake is your lifestyle foundation. You got to bake the cake before you ice it and put sprinkles on top. Realistically, the cake is I call it the core four. So these are the main important pillars: nutrition, sleep, sunlight exposure, training. Those are the core four. And then everything else on top of that, avoiding endocrine disruptors, sex, competition. These are like the icing on the cake. And then the herbs and supplements are basically like the sprinkles on top of the icing on the cake. So it's like not really that important and not really that great of a way to increase your testosterone. And again, it doesn't really solve the root cause. And there can be lots of different root causes.
That was very simply put, easy to understand. So that was for herbs.
Yeah. So now we can get into, and over-the-counter ones like T-booster supplements, right, that aren't herbs specifically. Most of them are just supplements for nutrients that most people have deficiencies in that are required for testosterone. So you'll see most of them have zinc, magnesium, boron. They're all kind of the same ingredients in different concoctions and recipes, but it's pretty much all the same shit. And you could just eat a steak and eat some eggs and a potato and like call it a day and not have to spend $100 million on testosterone boosting supplements over the years. And a lot of them also have like other fillers and other things. Like, I'm not a huge fan of supplements in general because you have to do a lot of due diligence to check out the companies and make sure that they're being honest, and a lot of misinterpreted data out there. There's so many different examples of like companies that are misrepresenting the information on their labels, things like that. So you really got to do the due diligence. I mean, that's one thing I do like about Purium.
Oh yeah. Hey, so is there so you just mentioned all of that. It's kind of put into an umbrella. You explained it amazing. Is there anything in that is worth taking? like, is it worth it even just like having a sprinkle every once in a while from your perspective?
It could be. I would just say to max out your lifestyle first, and then those things will be the icing on the cake. But then realistically, once you get your lifestyle on point and you get your testosterone up into the optimal range, you're not even going to be thinking about these things anyway.
Right.
So it's like you don't really need it once you get that foundation. But even then, like let's say you were, I don't know, training for a fight or something, and you're trying to keep it natty and not do like any kind of illegal stuff or any kind of like peptides or shit like that. This could be an option. You could temporarily get a little bit higher levels for a period of time to be like a little extra beast mode. I'm not like totally against that. I think that's cool. But again, it's only like the icing on the cake or the sprinkles on top. After everything else is on point, to maybe give yourself that little extra edge. But either way, I wouldn't recommend taking these for long periods of time. And if you do, you'd have to do like alternating. So like for Fedoja, it would be like once every other day or like a couple weeks on, a couple weeks off, something like that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Cool. What about for the chemical testosterone?
Yeah, so this one I have a little more beef with. So in general, I like Dr. Jack Cruz's quote that he said on the podcast with Andrew Huberman recently. He said, if you make it, you're not designed to take it. So I'm not entirely against supplements for micronutrients like minerals, like for example, like magnesium. I'm not totally against like vitamin C, creatine monohydrate, things like that. There's certain supplements that I'm cool with recommending to people. However, I never, ever recommend hormones to people. So even like vitamin D, that's a hormone. I don't recommend supplementing it under any circumstances. If anything, do like cod liver oil or something from a natural source where it comes from like a food, but I never recommend supplementing synthetic vitamin D. And so testosterone goes into that same category, right? Whenever you have hormones that are deficient, there's a mechanism involved. There's a balance in your body that's disrupted to some degree, and you have to fix the whole system to fix all of it. Now, if you are injecting testosterone because you're a professional bodybuilder or a professional athlete and you're looking to, make an informed decision, knowing what the consequences are in order to excel your career to where it needs to be. If you're a professional bodybuilder, you really can't like win the Olympia without doing steroids. It's just like, it is what it is. You need it. So if that's an informed decision you're going to make, that's really the only time I don't have beef with it. Either that, or if you have like a testicle injury or a brain injury or something that makes you legitimately hypogonadal or like not releasing the proper precursor hormones, something like that, where it's like a clinical issue that's preventing you, like you'll never be able to produce testosterone optimally, then maybe like something like TRT would make sense. But otherwise, I'm not a huge fan at all because of the negative feedback loop. So you're going to find this really interesting. So remember how I went over the production pathway in the beginning? The hypothalamus, GnRH with the estrogen receptors, and then that going everything downstream to testosterone and pulse, right? So what happens when you inject testosterone is you disrupt this loop and you create a negative feedback loop with the feedback loop. So what happens is when you inject testosterone, right, you have higher testosterone. So now you also will have higher estrogen because no matter what, aromatase is converting a percentage of your testosterone into estrogen. So you'll have higher estrogen because you have higher testosterone. Your hypothalamus will register the higher levels of estrogen and then we'll shut down GnRH production or lower GnRH production to some degree at the very least, depending on the dosage and how long you've been taking it. So then what happens is it reads that less GnRH means less LH and FSH, right? But the LH doesn't really matter because you're injecting testosterone, so who really cares, right? You don't really need the LH because it doesn't need to signal testosterone because you're just injecting testosterone, so you don't really need it. However, that lower GnRH also doesn't signal for FSH. So follicle stimulating hormone isn't telling your balls to make sperm. So this is the mechanism by which exogenous testosterone can cause infertility and testicle atrophy. So if you're on it for long enough, your testicles will shrivel up and the brain to balls connection is totally broken. And that's why the longer you're on testosterone, like TRT, can be super dangerous as far as fertility goes, because if you're on it for, let's say, like 6 months to a year or 2 years or 3 years, you are that connection, that communication has been destroyed for a very long time, and it's very difficult to get it back. So there are things that guys can do. You can take like HCG or like, estrogen receptor blockers. So the hypothalamus doesn't detect the higher levels of estrogen. So your GnRH production stays normal. That's one way that you can get on, that you can, mitigate the risk, but this can get expensive. And then, if you really want to do it and not have the major side effects. I mean, there's lots of different drugs that you can take and peptides and different things to make sure that you're optimal without the risk. But personally, I would rather just focus on the foods that I'm eating and the sunlight exposure I'm getting and the sleep that I'm getting instead of like how many needles I got to put in my ass today.
Many of you know that I used to own gyms in downtown LA for about 10 years, so I've seen people on their health and wellness journeys for many years at a time, and by far the biggest impact that I've seen any of them make has been on the ULT lifestyle. This program allows one's bodies to be functional in that it nourishes the cells, it helps facilitate the detoxification of the garbage that gets built up, and it also has the components for your body to rebuild itself. I've seen my clients make more change in 6 to 7 months than they did in 6 to 7 years working out in my high intensity functional fitness gyms. Check out the description of this show for $120 off your first month.
That's just my preference. Right. And that's, me and you, I guess we can both agree that I think the natural route is the best route. And if we're going to go on what is the most optimal way for humans to thrive, it would be being closer to nature in as many aspects as we possibly can. So
yeah, and nobody likes chemical castration. You mentioned Dr. Cruz and Huberman, and you're also mentioning light. But before we get into light, which is my favorite topic.
Mine too.
Did you get through the whole interview of them, and would you recommend that people check that out?
Yeah, I watched both parts. It's like, I think 6 hours total. I listened to the whole entire thing. I think Jack Cruz is one of the most interesting dudes on earth. I want him on my podcast so bad if he's listening to this. Jack Cruz.
He actually does seem like he has high levels of testosterone too, the way that he speaks and talks, and it sounds like he's competing with the world.
The confidence is definitely indicative that he would have pretty decent testosterone, or at the very least some pretty sensitive receptors.
Right. So you mentioned light a few times. Light on the balls. What are we talking about with sunlight?
Okay, so when it comes to testosterone, there actually isn't really much data on getting sun on your balls and testosterone. So I'm in the process of having my clients log all their sun exposure and then compare their blood work and put together some data on that and kind of turn like my programs into like a little case study type deal. But we're a little early in that for me to really draw any conclusions because I'm waiting for a lot more guys to come through. Like I'm waiting until there's like 1,000, 2,000 dudes that have gone through the program so we can see the data. But there is one study from the 30s, 1939. There's one study where they had a group of guys sun their chest and then another group sunned their balls and then another group didn't get sun at all, I believe. And I'm going to butcher these numbers probably because it's been a while since I looked at this, but the guys who sunned their chest and got their chest exposed, and this is like they sunned this area of the body until they were basically like almost burnt, like a decent amount of sunlight. So it's not like 15 minutes in the sun. It's like they roasted on purpose. So, and I'm assuming based on what I saw with the numbers that these guys were already pretty sunlight deprived in the beginning of the study. So that was my conclusion that I drew. So the guys that got their chest in the sun experienced, I think it was like 125% increase in their testosterone. And the guys that sunned their balls, I think it was like a 200% increase. So it was a little bigger from their balls in the sun. There's a couple things to consider, though. One, this is just one study with one group, but I do think that it's interesting. There's no data to show that testosterone isn't increased by sunning your balls. So that's cool for me. And then additionally, heat is a factor as well. So you don't want to overheat your testicles. That's a huge thing, especially with fertility as well. You want to keep your balls as cool as possible. Some guys are huge advocates for icing your balls or keeping them cool. I'm just an advocate for avoiding heat on your balls or cooling them down after you heat them up. So if you're going to go in the sauna and stay in the sauna pretty long, you want to maybe ice your balls or cool them down after you get in the sauna, or you get out of the sauna rather. When you're in the car, avoid heated seats. Don't stay in the hot tub for too long. Avoid tight underwear, especially like polyester, like unnatural material tight underwear. Things like that for testicle temperature. So if you're going to sun your balls, like maybe don't do it for like an hour in a row. Don't burn your dick. Don't like get sunburn on your balls. It's, normal stuff that you would expect to recommend for naked sunning. I actually remember years ago watching a video of you and Troy Casey, and you were discussing the science behind butthole sunning and the melanin in your anus and how it's basically like connected to the bottom of your spine. and basically feeds your nervous system and neuromelanin with the sunlight. I thought that was super fascinating. You are actually the person who is responsible for me getting into butthole sunning and naked sunning in general years ago. So thank you for that, my guy.
You're welcome. Yeah. I mean, for me, I was naked suntanning for at least 5 years before I made that video that went viral. For me, it's more about just getting all of your skin cells into the sun, because melanin, from my perspective, is grabbing sunlight and transferring it into the body. And there's pubes down there for a reason. That's filled with melanin. There's hair on your perineum. There's hair around your butt. That all needs and requires sunlight. And then it's feeding your body in ways that we won't get into on this show.
Yeah, we'll stay relevant to testosterone, I guess. Because we could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, it was one of my secrets on how I did.
We should talk about that when you come on my podcast. We'll talk about something.
It was one of my secrets of like how, and I figured it out accidentally, but then when I did figure out the power of light, it became a chore for me. Like I go outside even today, to this day, I go outside like I do eat. Like it's something that I just consume. So You mentioned sex. I know that's a hot topic as well on the internet right now for people that coach males, because there's this whole question of ejaculate, not ejaculate. Do we cultivate sexual energy? Do we leak out of the bottom of ourselves? Do we bring it up? You mentioned sex a couple of times as a way to increase testosterone. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yes. So to be very clear, to start off, I am not an advocate for semen retention. And that is as someone who practiced semen retention for a very long time, probably around 5 years, I was practicing semen retention. My longest streak was about 8 months, but on and off for years in my practice. And it was one of the last things I actually stopped doing in order to get my testosterone up. I was eating, sleeping right, training, doing a lot of the things, the sunlight, pretty much all of the foundational things, and I was still retaining. I was, at that 8-month mark where I was like, all right, this has been a really long time. And actually, it was really a year, but I busted one nut by accident at the 8-month mark. So then it was after the 8-month streak, then it was I was approaching the year, and I got my blood work tested at the end of the year to be all right, 1 year semen retention, what happened to my testosterone? And my total T was 300, 328, something like that. And I was like, damn, okay, so semen retention isn't really helping. And looking at the data, it does increase it to some degree, but not in the long term. So I think for the guys who are trying to utilize semen retention for maximum benefit, you should go for a week. I would say a week is pretty much the threshold. In one of the only studies, and it was retracted, but they saw a 45% increase after 1 week. And it stayed there for about 2 days and then went back to baseline and then never went back up. And actually there were 2 groups in that study. One group got to bust a nut when it was peaking and the other group didn't. And they busted a nut at the peak and then they went through went right back to retaining for the next week. And that group actually got another spike the next week, whereas the group that kept retaining didn't get another spike. So, and I realistically, I think that is the body kind of saying, okay, it's been a week without sex. We kind of want to get laid. Here's some extra testosterone to give you some confidence, get you out in the game so you can get laid. And then if you don't, it's all right, we tried, but you're not doing it, so we're not going to get it up. And then if you do it, then it's kind of okay, this worked last week, so let's try it again and get you laid again.
Yeah. Is being successful in dating, from your opinion, similar to being successful in a hunt or a fight or a competition?
Yeah, definitely. You're earning the sex to some degree. You have to, as a guy, you have to be the guy worthy of getting the sex from the girl. Girls are pretty much the gatekeepers to sex. So in order for that, she has to let you. And in order for that to happen, most girls are attracted to things that require a lot of hard work from men, whether that's your physique, whether that's your finances or whatever it is. You have to win competitions to win sex. They say girls wait at the finish line. So,
I've actually never heard that, but I've experienced it in real life.
Yeah. So that's pretty much the way it is. So yeah, I do think that sex is kind of an end product of winning competitions, but it itself is also winning competition because you're competing with every other man on earth for that girl.
Right. Yeah. You literally are.
Yeah. So, that's That's the way it is. I think it definitely is winning a competition. I want to dive into this a little bit deeper as well when it comes to the semen retention and the testosterone specifically.
Please.
So, if you are regularly having sex and ejaculating, your testosterone does go up over time. However, in the short term, after you ejaculate, it actually goes down. So, and this is for a reason. So I'm gonna get into this. This is, I think, really fascinating. So after you ejaculate, or let's start from the beginning. You start talking to a girl. You see a hot girl, right? Immediately testosterone going up. You're already excited. Dopamine's up. Testosterone's up. You're already kind of motivated to go talk to her, to do whatever. Even if like you're nervous, whatever it is, like that. There's hormones that are giving you a little extra boost to go do it. And then let's say you actually do succeed. You're having sex with the girl. Your testosterone continues to go up and go up and go up and go up. Same with your dopamine. Then what happens is you bust a nut and both testosterone and dopamine go to the shitter. They go all the way down real low, below baseline. And your prolactin goes super high. Prolactin is honestly kind of demonized for some reason. Not like too bad, but kind of in a sense of like, oh, prolactin's bad. It's the hormone that's known for new mothers producing breast milk. Mm-hmm. And it commonly goes higher in like men that are around children. So it tends to suppress testosterone and dopamine. There's an inverse correlation between prolactin and testosterone. So baseline higher prolactin levels are almost a great like inverse indicator of low testosterone. Like if you get your blood work done and just test your prolactin, you can kind of gauge based on how high it is, what your testosterone looks like. It's like that much of a negative correlation between the two. So what's interesting about this is it's a very temporary thing. It's not baseline prolactin increasing. It's just temporary prolactin increase. And this also happens when we experience a lot of pleasurable things, right? If you eat a steak and potatoes and you thoroughly enjoy it and it's delicious, at the end of your meal, prolactin will spike the same way to tell you that you're full, right? Prolactin will spike to reduce testosterone and dopamine, which are motivating chemicals, right? To say, okay, we don't need to be motivated to keep doing this thing. We did enough of the good thing. We're satisfied now. So that's what prolactin is for in that regard. So that prolactin spike from ejaculation is actually a good thing. It allows you to be satisfied with sex. And one of the biggest things I noticed in my experience with long-term semen retention is everything was fine. Everything was still working good, everything, whatever, but it wasn't satisfying over time. It was like all effort, no pleasure, like all effort, no reward, right? And there's a delicate balance between effort and pleasure that our hormone systems are designed to thrive in, right? If we are having too much pleasure without effort, things like porn or just like cheap forms of pleasure, right? We kind of disrupt our dopamine balance, if you will, or our dopamine fluctuations. Our baseline dopamine goes lower because we didn't put in enough effort to earn that dopamine spike, and the body knows that we're cheating. So it can't afford to keep doing that, so baseline dopamine goes lower. It also works the inverse way. So if you're doing lots of effort and you're constantly working hard, and you never get any type of pleasure, right? You're not reaching small goals, or you're not like busting a nut here and there. You're not like experiencing any kind of reward for the effort that you're putting in. You know, these semen retention guys want to last super long, like me included back in the day. You know, like you're clapping cheeks for like 2 hours and you're like, yeah, I'm the man. But you don't get the pleasure of the ejaculation at the end. So you don't actually get the satisfaction, and you're always kind of still craving for more to some degree. Or you get completely disinterested in sex and you're like, you know, this isn't worthwhile. I'm just going to continue to put in effort and not get a reward. It's almost not worth it for me. And this is subconscious. It's not like you think these things like verbally to yourself. It's more of like a subconscious thing. It's kind of like, you know, you play a sport and you guys lose every single game. Everyone shows up to practice not giving a fuck, right? But if you work hard and you win and now you got a shot at the playoffs, everybody's showing up and everybody's excited and ready to work hard. So there needs to be an optimal balance between the effort and pleasure, which is honestly the biggest reason why I'm not an advocate for porn. And also because that prolactin spike from porn is 4 times lower than the prolactin spike from real sex. So porn is also, and masturbating in general is also significantly less satisfying for that reason than real sex with a woman.
Wait, it's 4 times lower with porn or without porn?
With porn. So if you're masturbating compared to sex, masturbating will give you a 4 times lower prolactin spike than real sex will.
Okay, so prolactin goes up. So is there a mechanism that actually feeds the new cycle of testosterone to come through?
I'm not sure if it's prolactin regulated, but from what I've seen, it's that overall, like the next day after you ejaculate, you go to sleep, and then you wake up the next day and your testosterone is slightly higher. And if you do that consistently, it's like slight differences over time. I wouldn't consider it a huge fundamental pillar. Like I said, it's the icing on the cake. It's not part of the core four: nutrition, sleep, sunlight exposure, training. It's after those, but
Right.
it can help. And I would say in general, just an overall decently healthy sex life is what's important. Nothing extreme, no extreme restriction. You don't need to be busting 10 nuts a day. Like you don't need to like jerk off 5 times a day just because you want to ejaculate so you can get your tee up. It's not going to work. Same thing with like you don't have to be avoiding sex and not busting a nut and like religiously retaining for months on end to get your tee up, because that's not going to work either. It's just a healthy balance. Have enough sex, talk to girls, engage with females, and be social and compete with other dudes for girls, and be a guy that's worthwhile of female attraction,
Right.
and have a normal amount of sex like a normal person, and everything's all good. It's not, it doesn't really have to be rocket science, but it can be if we want to dive into the details. And even the deeper you dive into it, the more it just says just be normal.
So now I get what you were saying. It's less prolactin, which means you get less of a feeling of satisfaction
Exactly.
with masturbation.
Exactly. And that's why sometimes guys that masturbate will go like 3, 4, 5 rounds in a row and just continue to do it because they're still not satisfied. They still want more. And the prolactin spike is to make you disinterested in sex. So after you had sex, you did the thing. Like, ideally in nature, like your semen is in her already. The impregnation is already either going to happen or not. So it's like there's no more interest in sex. You're disinterested. You're satisfied. That's what it's for. So when you masturbate, it's kind of like your body knows you didn't do it. You didn't do the thing. So it can, it knows. What's also interesting is if you have different women, your hormones will shift differently as well. So like if you're having sex with the same woman like over and over again for a long time, that refractory period is a lot more significant. Whereas like let's say you have sex with one girl and then another girl wants to have sex with you 10 minutes later, the hormones will just go back to normal, and it's like, all right, testosterone, dopamine's going back up. It's like we could do this again because your body wants to pass on the genes. It doesn't mean that that's necessarily a good thing, but in the moment it will happen.
Well, I'm thoroughly satisfied with this discussion. But before we wrap up, do you have anything else that you feel is pertinent to add to what we're talking about?
Yeah, I guess to wrap up, I want to just summarize like a list of things. I kind of went into like detail on nutrition, and then we went into like a couple things like one by one. But I want to just go through.
Can you address
like,
the animal products versus not animal products in terms of testosterone, now that you mentioned nutrition?
Like vegan versus carnivore type thing? Or?
Like does eating meat increase testosterone? Because there's this, that documentary it was the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger in it, where they basically say that if you're a vegetarian, that your penis gets harder and stronger and all that stuff.
Oh, it was the Game Changers. It was the Game Changers.
Yeah,
I seen it. What I thought was really interesting and misleading about that is it was like a cheap burrito that they were eating. It wasn't like they didn't do like steak and potatoes or like a plate of oysters and salmon and mussels. It was like a cheap like burrito that they had, and then they just measured the strength of their boners. I feel like it's not a very useful experiment based on what they ate. It was literally just having the burrito with and without the meat in it, and who knows what the meat was cooked with or what oils were in it or whatever. I think it's not a very practical study that's applicable to people who are actually health conscious on nutrition. But that being said, I think both plants and animal foods are necessary for optimal testosterone. For example, you're not really going to get the optimal zinc to copper ratio from only eating plants. You're realistically not even going to get enough zinc. Also, things like vitamin A, retinol, you have to eat 15 times the amount of beta carotene to get the same amount of retinol that you would get from eating retinol in animal products. Vitamin D isn't really available. B12, there's other things that are just difficult to get, or you would have to supplement as a vegan, like if you're not eating them. And then as a carnivore, I don't know where carnivores are getting their boron from, how that works, because it's pretty much only in fruits and plants. And it's deficient a lot in soils. I actually do recommend a lot of people to supplement boron for testosterone specifically, because it's one that most people are deficient in and don't even really know about. But yeah, I think they're both important. But I would say if I had to pick one, I would say that the animal products are more solid as far as micronutrients go. And honestly, protein bioavailability, I would say animal products are a little better. It's like, there's pretty much no food out there that's better than oysters. I would say steak and oysters are like real close as far as like if I had to live off one food for the rest of my life, it would be between steak, oysters, and milk.
A2 milk.
Yeah, that raw good shit.
Yeah. The store by me sells A2 yogurt. It's amazing.
Yeah, A2 yogurt is fire. I wanted to just summarize like the main things that people can do to optimize their testosterone, just from like a basic to have like a starting point, because we went into one topic deep and then another topic deep. So just to like list them. So I would say the most important would be nutrition. Number 1 is nutrition. Number 2 is sleep. Number 3 is sunlight exposure. Number 4 is training. So whether that is like heavy lifting, there has to be a focus on legs, but also some kind of like challenging your body and mind, learning new skills, physical skills, something like that, pushing your body's limits to some degree, competition, body composition. So you don't want to be too lean, but you don't want to be too fat. Somewhere between 10 and 15% body fat is optimal for testosterone. However, like 15 to 20% is acceptable. If you're over 20%, get below 20%. If you're at 20%, get to 15. If you're under 10%, you might benefit from getting up to 10. I personally was at like 6.5, 7 when I was really skinny % body fat, and getting up to 10 absolutely changed my life. So you don't want to be too lean either, and also being too lean or too fat also raises prolactin levels, baseline prolactin levels. So you get all of the negative effects of having high prolactin, which are very different than the satisfaction that we discussed from the acute spike of prolactin. Then we have stress. Stress is another one with the inverted U curve. A lot of people demonize stress, but actually if you have too little stress, that's not good either. You'll have higher prolactin, lower testosterone if you don't have enough stress. So you need stress, but avoid unnecessary stress, avoid metabolic stress and like energetic stress, and pursue more stresses that are like workouts or more demanding things or challenges, things like that in life, as opposed to unnecessary stress or worrying or anxiety type stress. So stress isn't just stress, but we want, the inverted U curve. We want that money spot of amount of stress, and only you can really determine what that is for you, like what feels normal and healthy as an amount of stress. But if you have zero stress, I would say you're not trying hard enough in life. Next, I would say avoiding endocrine disruptors. So those are things like EMFs, plastics, certain clothing materials. There's an entire course I have on this, but there's a million different things that I could talk about as far as avoiding endocrine disruptors. So I'll leave it at that. Right. And then we discussed already, have enough sex. And then last but not least, testicle temperature. So you want to make sure that your testicles are not being overheated. And again, they don't want to be too cold either. Inverted U curve, money spot. But
so wearing like briefs, like whitey tighty type underwear is going to prevent the body from regulating the temperature of the testicles.
Yeah, this is because the testicles will hang lower or come up closer to regulate temperature. So if you're cold, your balls shrivel up. It's like, God, you joke about it when you're young. You're like, oh, my fucking balls are all tight. Like it's, when you're cold. And when you're hot, it's the opposite. So your balls will hang a lot lower and the scrotum will get like a lot looser in order to separate the testicles from the body so that they can cool down a little bit. And tight underwear like boxer briefs, tighty whities, prevent that from happening and keep them close even though they're trying to sag. So the heat is still there and your body continues to heat them up so they don't actually cool down like they need to. So I would say loose cotton boxers, if anything. But honestly, like I'm a big free balling advocate. Just go commando. I just wear those cotton shorts or cotton sweatpants, something like that.
I love doing that, except for when I go in public and then my mushroom head is just popping out for everybody to see, and the shaft and everything. So I do like to have an extra layer in there.
I feel you. I really like Soul Bra's brand, the Soul Apparel. Because those cotton shorts are pretty thick, so they're like it's pretty decent. It's not as bad. I get what you're saying though. Some of the thinner, like if you're gonna do like linen or something, you definitely see it right through. So in public, it's probably not good advice. Good point.
Cool. So we got Top T Nick on Instagram. What's your website?
The website is top-t-academy.com. So it's Top T Academy with dashes in the middle.
All right. Anywhere else where people can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/@TopTNick, and then Top T Nick on Twitter, and Top T Nick on TikTok, but I don't really use TikTok. I don't like it that much.
It's weird. I can't figure it out.
Yeah. Instagram is my main platform. I'm trying to focus on a somewhat of a shift to YouTube because I do like longer format videos. I just started my own podcast, so I would say YouTube and Instagram are the two main places you want to find me. If you're interested in the Top T Academy, then the website is probably the place to go. Either that or my Instagram.
And what's the name of your podcast?
The Top T Podcast.
There we go. All
I
right.
like to keep it simple.
Yeah. Super knowledgeable. I like the quickness of your speech. And yeah, thank you for explaining that all super simply for all of us.
For sure. Thank you
All
for having
right.
me on. It's been a pleasure.
Yes.
Good to finally
Take
connect with
care.
you as well, bro.
Oh, yeah, of course. Thanks, everybody, for joining us with Nick Caputo today. I hope you felt his energy and heard his words. Next week, we are hearing from Jay Campbell, and Jay's got some different perspectives than Nick, so I'm excited for us all to learn from his viewpoint. Subscribe to the show, and if you really want to contribute to somebody else's awareness of self through hearing from all these different experts, leave a review. Let the world know how you're feeling right now in this moment. Until next time, I invite you to integrate something that you learned today and enjoy your time in space, everybody.